Last video I said, oh, I hope that I get there quicker than 2 weeks, but then 2 weeks came by, and I can't promise anything. I guess I'll just say that when I do big series like that, especially when it's like big brain analysis, I'm gonna like not spend an all-nighter, but like I'll spend quite a few of nighttime hours working on something, and that tires me out, so I kind of want to do my own thing for a while. In any case, this doesn't matter for those who are in the future. Never mind you people. But the current ones now, I just wanted to let you know. And also, before I get into this whole video, I wanted to mention that I have ads now. Woohoo! I am quite popular now. I am quite the YouTube celebrity now, so quite famous actually. Yes, no. Anyway, so no, I have ads, and I think how they work is you have to like watch the whole ad, and or you have to click it in order for me to get the money or something like that. But that's only if people are actually interested in like giving me some coins. I've decided to put like no mid-roll ads or anything, even though my videos are so long they can warrant them. I just think with ads I want to go in a little soft and just have like one in the beginning or one at the end or whatever YouTube does. I don't know. In any case, there was another thing I wanted to just briefly mention, that on March 12th, that was Detransition Awareness Day, or Detrans Awareness Day, created by Kira Bell. Obviously this video is not going to be about that, but I wanted to make one sometime in the future, probably right after this video. I just want to mention it because I want other people to be aware of it. Finally, getting to the thing itself, which y'all came here for, I want to preface this by saying I'm gonna guess my title is gonna be what I wrote here: trans medicalists versus Tucutes, like what's worse. I just want people who don't know me, I want you to know that I am a detransition person, if you didn't get that from the Detransition Awareness Day thing. I'm coming at this at an angle of as kind of unbiased as I can, because I've seen a few videos kind of like this where it's trans medicalists versus Tucutes, and it'll be done by a trans identified person, and what'll typically happen is either it'll be by a transmed or a Tucute, and the transmed's like, oh, I don't like the Tucutes, they're horrible, blah blah blah, oh, they do this and they ruin it for everybody, blah blah blah. And then meanwhile the Tucutes will say, well, I don't like the transmed because they do this and blah blah blah, and I am valid and cute and blah blah blah. Like the title seems to suggest like, oh, versus, so like you're gonna go into it unbiased, right? And you're gonna give your audience like a level, you know, a level-headed, balanced view of what it is. No, they never do. I'd like to think that this video of mine is gonna be as unbiased as possible, because I don't like either of them. But there is, I have to admit, there is a slight leaning toward Transmeds, and I honestly kind of like them a little bit better. And I say that because I used to be a transmed, but I have looked into the Tucute thing, and you know, credit where credit is due. This video is mostly to address some people, especially parents, who are like, Willa, what are you talking about? I don't know what this Tucute thing and this transmed and this true scum thing, what is it? I don't know what you mean. It's like you said it before, but I don't know. You're not defining it. Well, help me. No. I'm not making fun of you. I'm sorry. This video is also defining what they are. Killing two birds with one stone is pretty much what I'm aiming for. So let's finally get into it. I want to start with briefly defining what the terms are, and then I'll elaborate on them. So for Tucutes, most non-binary / xenogender, I'll get to that in a second, align themselves as Tucutes, which is the belief that you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and you don't need to medically transition if you don't want to. You can just socially transition and dress however you wish. You are valid, you are trans, basically. If you think it, you are it. Transmedicalists / transmeds / true scum are typically transsexual people who fix themselves on the gender binary. Transmeds believe you need gender dysphoria to be trans. You need to dress and act the part of the opposite sex and medically transition, which is necessary to be trans, unless, of course, you are too poor and can't afford it. But even then, if you can't afford it, you should probably feel very stressed out and guilty because you cannot afford it, and you're trying to make all aims to get to that medical transition. But if you're like kind of laying back and like, well, I'm nonplussed about it, so then you're not a transsexual, you're not a transmed. Anyway, so I guess some of them are also like, if you're too poor and can't afford it, then you're probably just not trans anyway, apparently. But that's mostly a too cute sort of perspective on it in any case. Oh, it's classist. Anyway, so just keep in mind that not all transsexuals are transmedicalists and not all non-binary are Tucutes. This is just the average alignment of these ideological subset of transgenderism. Non-binary is someone who aligns themselves outside of the gender binary, so male, female, they're outside of that, or they're both, or there's some kind of mix between, or they switch back and forth between the two. They're not specifically male, and they're not specifically female. Xenogenders are simply the umbrella term for all non-binary genders. Xenogender is basically the whole giant list of genders they all created. I'll elaborate as I go on. So let's elaborate on Tucutes first. Tucutes can be non-binary, but they can also be transsexual, and they may or may not experience gender dysphoria. Some of them do experience gender dysphoria, but others don't. Some of them experience just like chest dysphoria. Most of the time they'll have social dysphoria, which is where they're like, oh, people see me as a girl, like socially, so, oh, why you can't treat me like a girl, sort of thing. That's what social dysphoria generally is. Tucutes don't focus nearly as much on passing as whatever gender they identify as, although there is kind of an aim, loosely, to be seen as non-binary, but obviously it's very hard to spot when you have no idea what transgenderism even is. Like, hello, I'm from some place in Africa. What is non-binary? Oh, you're just a girl. That would be it. And just because they don't focus as much on the passing, like, don't be fooled by it. If they don't dress the part or mess with their hair to look a certain gender or whatever they're feeling, they will certainly try to act the part, or at least they'll believe they're acting the part. The reality is more likely that they will appear very much like they're behaving as a male or female, because, you know, biologically they are a male or female. So this will look like a tomboy for girls and Jane girl for boys. You know, these two cute non-binary people will very much adamantly deny that they are androgynous, and tomboys and Jane girls, they will adamantly deny it. Typically, two cutes will take on neopronouns like z, zer, and zim, as a plethora more where that came from. Most of the time they go for singular they, them, which I'll opt for sometimes depending on the context. It's safe, even toward a transsexual or transmed person as well. So they'll still basically act like their sex, and they will dress very typically in accordance to their gender. In other words, girls will still dress up in dresses and low-cut tops that show off cleavage, and often the guys will just kind of wear what they just believe is just very comfy clothing, very practical. It's like, yeah, that's what guys do. They always go for practical and comfy, always. Some Tucutes have interest in taking cross-sex hormones to get their voices to an androgynous level. Some take interest in a double mastectomy, and it's rare, but it exists. Some do opt for just bottom surgery and nothing else, which it's it sounds wild to me, but like some of the men will be like, oh, I just want to get a, whatever the procedure's called, where they stuff their willy up themselves, you know, and they'll be like, woohoo, I got a vagina now. And then that's it. They don't do anything else. They even look very much like they would as men, you know, but that's what they go for. But in any case, it's rare. I don't really see it that often, but it happens. The females sometimes desire just chest compression garments. They're called binders. From what I've gathered, most Tucutes/NBs, which is non-binary, slash xenogenders are female. I very rarely see males doing it, but I think, and I was just on the subreddit for like, I was on trans subreddits, and they were saying that male non-binary people are kind of rare because, like, males are bad, you know? So it's like, stop invading our space because you're especially if you're a white male sort of thing, and if you're heterosexual, like, you're kind of not allowed in a little bit. You're more likely to see a guy go full transsexual because, like, you can't go halfway. Tucutes are the ones that keep extending the acronym LGBTQAI, the rest of the alphabet, adding in new genders like demigirl, demiboy, boyflux, gira girl, etc., etc. The list goes on. They also seem to heavily overlap with otherkin, which is to identify as an animal species other than human, as well as inanimate objects and even concepts like celestial being, voids, and invisibility. Yeah. I guess I could link a whole list of them, and, you know, while I was reading this list, it's just like, does anyone actually seriously identify as any of these things? Like, who identifies as a gender that is invisible? Like, and most of the time, the genders all sound the same to me, except for obviously the ones that are like freeze gender, winter gender, like, what is this? This isn't even gender. These are just like things that aren't even alive. But in any case, moving on. Let's not judge them. We're going into this unbiased. Credit where credit is due. What I don't mind about Tucutes is that they are not all interested in irreversible surgeries. They don't seem to frequently take part in telling others to medically alter their bodies. They don't seem to bully others into medical transition and gatekeep how exactly transgenderism works. Tucutes are the ones that say there's no right or wrong way to be trans, and in some ways it's slightly emphasis on minuscule, just like marginal, like paper thin, slightly admirable that these people seem more open to expression, switching things around, and being kind of creative with their expression. And sometimes, like, even in a way, it's like, it's kind of impressive to me how they can make this huge long list of genders and just keep going. And I don't know if it's Tucutes or it's just kind of I'm pretty sure it's Tucutes. I don't want to assume it's probably the entire community, really, but I think they've also made sexualities too, like hundreds and hundreds of different types of sexualities that are nowhere near heterosexual, because that one's gross. That one's the most disgusting one, unless you're trans. If you're trans and heterosexual, you're fine. Unless you're a woman trying to be a man, then it might not be fine. In this way, they seem more open and accepting of others. However, they can virtue signal how accepting and open they are, and that's kind of obnoxious. But other than those people, they seem more open and accepting and less likely to be negative, you know, a negative Nancy, basically. Tucutes typically don't experience gender dysphoria, like I said. It might not be in the same debilitating, soul-crushing manner as transmeds experience gender dysphoria. Like I said, there's like social dysphoria, but in any case. So on this front, I don't really mind them. But on another, I strongly dislike how whiny they get when it comes to neopronouns and misgendering. Their approach to misgendering is different from transmeds because Tucutes make up rules as they go along. Like I said, they they make new genders all the time, and especially the matter with gender fluid people, which is people who switch back and forth between the binary. So they're going to be looking all femme one day and then all masculine the next, and then they kind of just expect people to read their minds, like, oh, I'm dressing masculine today, so please refer to me as he, him, and my male name Brandon or whatever. And then, oh, I'm feeling very femme this day, so please refer to me as Jessica, and she, her, blah blah blah. And it's just like, you can't expect other people, especially laymen, especially people who have no idea what this stuff is, you can't expect them to read your mind. And, just because you might be, like, wearing some clothes that look typically masculine or typically feminine, they don't know. So there really isn't any reason to get uppity about it at all. And this is very different from transmeds or transsexual people, because at least with transmeds / transsexual people, they will always dress the part. It's very consistent, it never changes, and it looks very stereotypically male or stereotypically female, and so that's a lot easier to read. When I say that, I'm not trying to say like, oh, transmeds do it better, transsexual people do it better. I'm trying to say that both approaches are, meh. They're meh. Moving on to transmeds specifically, these people believe that you do need gender dysphoria to be trans, and the only way to be successfully trans is via medical transition. Because of this ideological leaning is, in my opinion, the most dangerous. I know I said I'm biased toward transmeds a little bit, but they are the most dangerous. Transmeds' one saving grace is that they do gatekeep and don't as often recklessly implore trans eggs to transition. Trans eggs, by the way, I'm gonna make another video on explaining what they are and what the trans community does to trans eggs. So wait on that one. Transmeds are more likely to tell someone that they aren't trans based on a checklist they have from the DSM-5. They don't want everyone to transition, and often they want to retain the sanctity of the sex binary. They often don't believe in non-binary people as well. They don't believe you can mix the two. They don't believe that you can get outside of it. They often believe in biology. Of course, many don't, because a lot of transsexual transmeds want to be, cisgendered desperately, so they'll throw biology out the window, and they seek to merge greater normal society with transsexualism. The most insidious thing I would say about transmeds is that once you believe you might be transsexual / have gender dysphoria, they will push medical transition onto you, and I would say that transmeds are going to be the most likely reason. Putting my prediction hat on, I believe that transmeds are going to be the more likely reason why there's going to be a massive wave of detransitioners in the very near future. Despite the fact that I know that transmeds will look at Tucutes and think, oh, you're going to be the reason why there's going to be a ton of detransitioners in the future. But when you mess with a body, you're more likely to detransition due to medical complications, because your body very likely cannot handle cross-sex hormones, especially for long-term use. Whereas when it's just an idea and you just think and believe that you're trans, you're less likely to desist, I would say. Transmeds are heavily involved in science proving transgenderism. Meanwhile, Tucutes express little to no interest, because Tucutes want to prove that transgenderism is not a mental illness, nor is it a medical condition, because there's nothing wrong with you. Transmeds, on the other hand, claim that trans identification is a medical condition. They'll typically call it transsexualism because, it has a medical history. It's a medical condition, and it does need psychiatric evaluation. That's their words, in order to be trans, and there is science to back that up. Transmeds demand a filter for those who can be trans, because there is an attempt at reducing trans regret. Very small, but it's kind of there. It's Tucutes, however, who demand that there should be zero filters for a medical transition and everyone should go through affirmative care and never be questioned on their gender dysphoria, gender identity at all. There are some transmeds who hate the affirmative care model because they don't believe in transitioning children or teenagers, although they're a little bit more okay, or a lot more okay, when it comes to affirmative care for adults who have gender dysphoria and, desire to be trans-identified, because they think that, once you're an adult, you can just make sound decisions, even though that's not necessarily true, but, let them have their one thing, right? Since transmeds often prefer being full stealth because they want to be cis very badly, as I said, a small subset called radmeds, which are radical trans medicalists, don't tend to disclose their trans status with everyone. This includes medical staff and potential romantic or just purely sexual partners, which these are the two most important aspects of our lives that require knowledge of one's sex. They do this with partners mostly because they want to avoid tranny chasers. Their words, not mine. They're more likely to say just chasers, and also for general safety reasons. And I put that in air quotes because I just disagree. It's very unsafe to do it, but in any case. However, most transmeds seem to actually care to share their trans status and form potential partners of their biological reality and check off the male or female box on a form in their doctor's office, because these transmeds actually genuinely care about their health and safety. These are the transmeds that make the most sense to me, and that was the transmed that I was. These sorts of transmeds also know what their dating pool is and go for trans-accepting people rather than just pursue everybody. This isn't, of course, squarely on transmeds. Tucutes do it as well, but in any case, transmeds more often think to blame themselves and their trans identification as the reason why they can't get relationships or why life is so hard for them. They will be the ones who will frequently say, it's hard being trans, and why would you want to be trans because it's so hard? And that's another added tension from transmeds to Tucutes, because Tucutes in the transmeds' minds are just lackadaisically being like, oh yes, being trans is fun, being trans is trendy, being trans is entertaining to me, basically. That's how the transmeds look at the Tucutes. Meanwhile, the Tucutes blame society for all their problems, which makes them more vocal about rejection and sexual preferences. It's the Tucutes, especially the transsexual Tucutes and the trans extremists / the trans rights extremists / activists who claim you're transphobic if you won't date trans people. So they're the most obnoxious ones out there. Both transmeds and Tucutes do tend to bark up the wrong tree when it comes to dating. Both don't tend to date within their community, in other words, with other trans-identified people, though it is not uncommon to see them dating each other. The general consensus is that Tucutes and transmeds go after normal people. They call them cis, but they're normal. Hence the sudden popularity in supersexualities, which is a thing that blew up recently. If the trans community just dated each other, like, pretty much exclusively, supersexualities would not have blown up ever. So you created your own problem, but in any case, that's that. So now I want to address what is the main source of tension between Tucutes and transmeds, and I would say the civil war between them is that the Tucutes don't like that transmeds gatekeep. They don't like how transmeds have like a huge multi-system filter on how to be trans, how to look trans, how to live it. It is a lifestyle choice. You have to do it in a certain way. And Tucutes, their feathers are very ruffled. Tucutes want to be transgender, meanwhile transmeds want to keep transsexualism pure. so they can better blend in with, be taken seriously, and be better understood by society at large. Even though Tucutes will look at them and think, why are you doing that? That's like transphobic. Why would you do that? We need to be our own club. And it's like, how I see it is that, yes, the transmeds are correct here because they do need to be accepted by normal people by and large so that they can get their rights. And so I do agree with transmeds on this, with Tucutes who are saying like, oh, we don't need filters, we just need to go in and if you believe you are trans, blah blah. Trans also includes being otherkin, basically. So it looks foolish and like child's play, and a lot of Tucutes are very young. They are teenagers. You know how teens are. They want to be taken very seriously. They want to be treated as adults. They're not adults and they don't know what they're doing, but they want to be treated like they are all that. Transmeds believe that Tucutes soil the name of transsexualism by betraying the binary, which therefore puts transsexuals more in danger, physical danger and psychological and emotional danger, because outsiders will see the Tucutes / the non-binary people and these people making up all these new genders, all these new pronouns, all these new identities, and they'll think like, well, that was a circus. Tucutes looking at this response from the transmeds saying that to them, they'll conclude that the transmeds are that they have internalized transphobia, seeing as though the transmeds are the ones who complain about their trans identification, that being trans is very hard, it's why they suffer, and they really wish they weren't trans at all, but cisgendered. In other words, transmeds believe that as trans women, they really genuinely wish that they were women, whereas the trans men genuinely want to be men. Tucutes put more emphasis on trans identification. You know, the label trans identification, that's like amazing. Like it's the same, it's a similar kind of pride in being gay or lesbian, that sort of thing. So it's like, I am proud to be this. Whereas transmeds just wanna, in the Tucute side, they don't want to be trans at all. They want to be cisgendered. And I don't know, it's a bunch of mental gymnastics. I kind of get it, but I think the Tucutes are going a little too far on that front. But in any case, I'm meant to be unbiased. Anyway, so technically, the Tucutes' perspective on all this trans stuff, they're technically right, because the word transgender is very open-ended, and although it includes transsexuals, it also includes non-binary / xenogenders. So to gatekeep the meaning and identification of transgender is very futile. Based on my understanding of the term transsexual, it has relatively recently, been seen as offensive because, as I said, and currently too, like, transsexualism has that history of being a medical condition, like there's something wrong with you. It's a mental illness, as they say. Not my words, that's what's going on here. And this would be similar to the word homosexual, and that word specifically, because that holds the connotation of a medical problem, like there's something bodily wrong with you. That's kind of why like homosexual has been a word that you kind of shouldn't use, but it's definitely lightened up recently. And the word transgender was adopted as something more acceptable, like it was kind of like a replacement for transsexual. At least that's my understanding of it anyway. Transsexuals have tried to claim transgender as their new transsexual and would be Tucutes at the time that this was happening. Once the transsexuals took on the term transgender for themselves, whatever year that was, I don't know exactly. This is not a history video. Would-be Tucutes merging from the woodwork began to claim that they're transgender based off the DSM-5's very vague definition of transgender. Technically, they're trans too because they check off all these boxes, and this whole thing has rubbed transmeds the wrong way for many a year. Some things that they don't necessarily bring them together, but there's still some, like, there's a little bit of common ground between the two. This is pretty much the reason why I'm still not, like, I don't really like Transmeds all that much. Since both Transmeds and Tucutes are still part of the transgender community or trans community, they police language like everybody else in the community. Both share the common enemy of TERFs and transphobes, aptly named neo-Nazis, and they will believe it's morally okay to bully and harass radical feminists and conservatives, but if anyone bullies their own, which in reality, bullying just mostly just looks like, no, I'm not going to use your new name, I'm not going to use your neopronouns, or I'm going to criticize what your ideology is. Like, that's seen as violent, bullying, horrible, irredeemably vicious. Both the ideologically leaning people, they see that as an eye for an eye, and thus they are allowed to cancel, censor, delete any group or individuals, bully, dox, threaten, harass these people, as well as ruin their careers, as if that's fair. Like, I'm gonna criticize you a little bit. Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna expose where you live and get in contact with your employer and get you fired. Like, that's not an eye for an eye. You have no idea what an eye for an eye even means. However, this whole thing of canceling people, this is not enough to unify them. But there is a little bit of a nod at each other, you know, like the way that men do when they're passing each other on the street, they'll go, ugh. Both parties also have a fixation on respect. Respect to them is defined, both parties, by adhering to their rules, adopting their new name, even if it's not legal, if it's a social transition, you have to respect it. Their new pronouns, which, whether those pronouns are on the binary, or they're they, them, or they're a neopronoun, addressing them as the opposite sex to others. And then you also have to respect whatever xenogender people want to be addressed as. And yeah, some transmeds will want to respect these xenogender people. Respecting each other's gender identity is very sacred between all of them. There is some respect here between both Tucutes and Transmeds, but many Transmeds don't see Tucutes as valid and cute. These are more of the rad meds, I would say. And these sorts call those Tucutes as trenders, trans trenders, and therefore refer to them as their biological sex, especially when gender dysphoria is not present. In conclusion, if there was any, like, lesser of two evils sort of thing here, I would probably say, and again, I'm biased, I would say that transmeds ideologically are less dangerous because they don't necessarily push trans identification onto people as much as Tucutes do, because Tucutes, they'll be the ones who say, like, oh, if you are questioning your gender at all, that therefore means definitively that you are trans-identified. Whereas a transmed is not going to say that. Even though transmeds do push medical transition on trans-identified people who might have otherwise not considered it, but then felt pressured to feel more trans, or, like, you know, full true trans, basically. Therefore, I kind of see the Tucutes as kind of like a gateway drug to transgenderism. Like I said, like, some of them do go for medical transition, so it's like, if you believe you're trans at all, you might be interested in medical transition. Do you kind of see what I mean? Like, Tucutes are like the... Tucutes are kind of like the COVID-19 of the world of transgenderism. This is extremely offensive. They spread it very fast to anybody. They just breathe on them, and suddenly that other person is infected with Tucutism. Whereas transmeds are more like... they're more like a sexually transmitted disease. It's more particular. There's a little bit more of a filter because, you know, when it comes to hookups, there's a little bit of, you know, courting, just a little bit at least. You know, you have to gain attention of each other. So yeah, that's why I believe Tucutes are a little bit more dangerous, at least ideologically. Physically, both are very bad. Both are very bad. Obviously, you don't want to get COVID, and obviously, you don't want to get a sexually transmitted disease. All right? I can safely conclude, however, that both ideological leanings are very bad, very insidious, and both communities are bullies and toxic as hell. That's how I see that. It's very unbiased, I know. It's unbiased because, you know that one saying, I don't know if people say it anymore, I'm not bigoted, I hate everybody, sort of thing. That's kind of my approach to this, and I know it's I basically threw grenades at both parties. There is a lot of nuance between both Tucutes and Transmeds. There's a lot of overlapping in their ideology. So it's like, if a non-binary person has gender dysphoria, some transmeds are going to be like, well, they experience gender dysphoria, so that therefore must mean they're trans. And then there's also non-binary people who don't subscribe to the xenogender thing, but they will like just literally want to be androgynous, and transmeds will see those types and be like, oh, that's fine, because at least you're trying to look like something, you know. They understand androgyny. The Tucutes will cross the line when it comes to freeze gender. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. And my next video is going to be on Detrans Awareness Day and my thoughts on that. And I'm also going to elaborate on how the trans community treats detransitioned people. Both the detransitioned people who seek to retransition and the permanent detransitioners who don't retransition. I'm going to address that. Hopefully I'll be able to do it next week. I don't like taking 2-week breaks, just so you know. And yeah, so I will see you when I see you. I hope this video was, once again, informative. I hope it answered some questions. I hope it was clear and concise. And that's it. Goodbye.